Welcome to All Clear, the podcast that takes you beyond the rails. Brought to you by the team at Australian Jumping, this podcast dives into the stories, the people, and the horses shaping our sport. Whether you're a seasoned competitor or simply love the thrill of the clear round, All Clear delivers the conversations that matter. Hit subscribe and join us for a fresh perspective on the sport you love. Really pleased to welcome Edwena Mitchell as my guest today, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Edwina about the upcoming Jumping at Willinga World Cup show. Welcome, Edwina.
Thanks, Jo. Thank you very much for having me.
Before we start talking about Willinga, I just want to say huge congratulations on receiving the Services to Sport Award at the recent Equestrian New South Wales Awards. How did it feel to be recognised in that way by your peers and the sport that you've given so much to?
It was great. I mean, I am in very august company. Jane Kibble, Jen Smith, Jane Frankham, a lot of pretty cool people who've done a huge amount for the sport have preceded me. It's always nice to be recognised. You don't do this to be recognised. You do it because you love the sport and from whence you came to the sport. I came to the sport through my daughter. That's why I do shows for Jennifer and for all the other riders, of course. But yeah, it was nice. It was a lovely night. Typical Edwina, arrived late, and mine was the first award, and so I missed it because I thought we'd have a little G&T before we left, and then we had to go and pick up George Sanna because he was receiving an award, and then we had to drive, and it took longer than we thought. They represented it, which was very kind of them to do this. Yeah, that was a classic Edwina moment.
You mentioned Jen, and obviously we've had Jen on the podcast before. And in fact, her episode has the most listens to date for this very new series. You must be a very proud mum, and not for that reason, obviously, but tell us a little bit about Jen and your relationship with her.
I've always been proud of her. She's always been a teacher. Even at Pony Club when she was 12, she was always followed by a troop of little people. And that carried all the way through. Mother was a teacher, and I think Jennifer's got a lot of, and my mother was a really good teacher. She's still remembered incredibly fondly by some of her students, of which Kerry Winning is one. Mum taught her at Ascot. Anyway, Jennifer has been. She's such a nice person. She's so unlike me in that regard. She's like her father, who is a nice person. I'm nasty, snippy, naughty, sarcastic, bossy, loud, and all sorts of other things. And Jennifer is not any of those. She is a fundamentally lovely person, a great teacher. And it was great to listen to her because she's also, like a lot of show jumpers, she's quite humble. I think she's quite humble. And it was lovely to hear her chat to you. And it was a nice episode. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, and I really loved chatting with her as well. It was really enjoyable. And she's a lovely lady and just always such a smiley face and a nice word to say when you're out on the arena.
And she's always very positive with her students. She always got a kind word to say. The funny thing is, I hear her now and look at her now and I think, oh, Glory, she's one of the senior riders. She's actually a senior rider. She had a wonderful AJC 24, and to get a second place at Caboolture in the World Cup qualifier was pretty dang good out of 24. So that was a nice place to get behind her very long and old friend Jim Winning. It was pretty cool. Very cool.
It was lovely to see. So let's move on to the upcoming Jumping at Willinga show. So I'm sure that most people listening to this podcast know the tireless work that you put in as a show organiser, obviously for Waratah show jumping. But today I want to chat with you about Jumping at Willinga. Can you share how your relationship with Willinga first began?
It began midway through the 2021, the second COVID year. I had a call from a mutual Willinga friend, Jeff Spears, who said they were looking for another equine events manager and specifically someone to put on their jumping event because they'd built the show jumping arena. And we hadn't used it yet. It hadn't been used at that point for show jumping because of COVID. So I tootled down there. I actually snuck down there because Cabon, where I live, a small town, Kudal, 50 k's or thereabouts west of Orange, we were in a little lockdown, so I wasn't actually allowed to go anywhere. And at that stage we were in the point of COVID where you had to sign in and wherever you went and all sorts of things. So I tootled down and went in. I took my computer and we had a chat, Terry Snow and myself and Chad Percival, who was the GM at that stage. And I showed them Global and what we could do with Global and how one of the things that they struggled with at that stage was an entry platform. They'd done the camp draft with an entry platform for that. They'd done dressage by the sea with Nominate for that. But, we show jumpers use Global. And I'm not saying Global's, perfect. None of them are perfect. But, there are a couple of features in Global, and particularly when you combine it with scoring and JJD at that point, Terry and Chad were impressed with. So anyway, they offered me a job and I started to go down there. Things were starting to pick up very slowly after. That was in July or thereabouts. My first event was a show horse thing in early December. And, at that stage, again, post-COVID, hospitality had completely and utterly shut down and, my business was shut down. I'm a cook. What eventuated was we couldn't find anyone to run the catering, the cooking, to do the canteen. So we didn't have a caterer. So I sort of said, well, I can run the canteen and I can bring my staff down. So I did. So I was the equine events manager and also did the canteen with all my stuff. And then it bucketed down with rain and howling gale. We had to cancel the first day completely. So my catering numbers went out the window. But then overnight, no rain, an hour in the morning and away we go. So that was my introduction to, Willinga at events. And then it sort of, went on from there. We have a small winter dressage competition. Kathy Dree-Klein runs. That's in July. So there was dressage by the sea, camp draft, dressage in July. And then we did our first show jumping event, which was pretty fabulous. We were all very happy about that. And, we all looked at each other at the end of the Grand Prix and said, we've got to do a World Cup here. The surface is, show jumping arena, that surface is so good. With the grandstand, the size of it was really good. And then I think 3 weeks after that, we turned around and did New South Wales state titles. They were supposed to be in Canberra, but because Canberra had so much rain, they relocated it down to Willinga. So, bang, we did 2 show jumping events, within 3 weeks. I think I might have gone home for 2 days.
For people who haven't visited Willinga Park yet, how would you describe the venue? You have mentioned the surfaces, but tell us a little bit about the facilities, the environment, and just the overall vibe of the place.
It is the most wonderful place. I've been going backwards and forwards now since 2021. I often stay there on my own. I've got the whole venue. There's just me in either my caravan or a pavilion back in the old days, and you can hear the sea, foxes, cows, horses, whatever. It is as fabulous when there's only me there as when we have 180 riders, 450, 500 horses, and, tractors and everything and all the rest of it. It was Terry's home, and he built a house and he built all sorts of facilities. Some of them he built 3 times. It's also built on hills, on hilly countries. The surfaces are great. The facilities are amazing. The welcome that we get from, and have always got from the Willinga Park people, from Terry and Jeanette, from Chad, who's no longer there, but from all the staff who are there now. Terry wanted to be used as an equestrian, sporting, fabulous facility, and that's what it is. He's made it welcoming. Terry hated signage, so there are no signs on the place. So we've always had sandwich boards with, competition stables here and Grand Prix stables there and this way to that place and all the rest, which is quite cute. It is a glorious place. It really is. The sculptures, garden, the landscaping, quality of the services is second, and I don't believe there's another facility in Australia quite like it. There are other facilities that might be larger. We did the most fantastic AJC 24 last year, Australian Jumping Championships. I was very, very pleased with the event from all front. Quality of competition didn't hurt that we had Olaf Peterson as the course designer. He was fantastic. And we also had fine weather, which was amazing. And the only drawback was the size of our ring 2, unfortunately. And that even has got a funny story. When I first got there, I was saying, we were talking about where we would have a second arena for our show jumping. And I looked at what's called the warm-up for the covered arena, and I said, it's too small. You can't. We've got a minimum size for an outdoor arena, and we still don't meet it. Anyway, at that point, I think the arena was 68 by 33 or something like that. And literally, I went home for a couple of days during the week. I went home and, came back the next week and, Chad turns up and says, well, we're making the warm-up arena. How big do you want it? And I said, well, it needs to be 4,000 square metres. That's the minimum size for an outdoor arena. Well, we can't do that, he said. So we ended up with 79 by 38 metres, which is, I think, about 3,200 square metres. And it will do for jumping at Willinga. It's a fantastic ring too. For AJC, Australian Jumping Championships, just not quite big enough, which is such a shame. But that was Terry. See a problem and fix it, sort it. We needed a big arena, so we made a bigger arena. And for show jumping, we use that as our ring too, and the warm up is the covered arena. For dressage by the sea, of course, the covered arena is their main arena. We've also got at Willinga the Grand Prix arena, which is just the most gorgeous thing. There's the most magnificent building next to it, which we call the Grand Prix room. And that was Terry's first venture into a competition arena and surface. And he did the right thing. He put an auto ebb and flow there, and built grandstands and sculpture and the most amazing Corten lights, which is a sort of a rusted steel looking product, which is, I just love it to death. And the most stables down there, which are just amazing. And I believe Terry told me once there's 37 lineal kilometres of black butt roofing timber on the roof and walls of the luxury stables. It was his home, and he loved it, and he loved to develop it. And that was Terry.
You mentioned last year's jumping at Willinga, and it was a fantastic show. We did have a little bit of a weather challenge. Do you want to tell us about the weather challenge we came across just before the World Cup?
Yes, well, we decided we'd do the World Cup. We have amazing on both the warm-up and the show jumping arena. So naturally, we'll do a World Cup. And then we had a tornado. And every single, and at 4:30 in the afternoon, Mark Atkins had built, it was looking pretty cool, very cool. And then at 4:30, whooshka, this wind came and blew everything down except the Waratah pillars. They were the only thing that was still standing after the tornado. So we sort of looked at each other, threw our hands up in the air and said, we'll do it again in the morning. So that's what we did. And on Sunday morning, glorious weather. It was a beautiful day. You've got a tornado 1 minute down at the coast, and then, the next minute in the morning, it's the most glorious, glorious day. So we ran our World Cup. It was our first World Cup, or CSI 1-star W. We had 28 starters, which was amazing. I think it was the biggest field for an Australian World Cup qualifier in some years. It was fabulously won by Billy Raymond on Carpina. So that was very good. And that was in September. And then, of course, we fronted up again in November for Australian Jumping Championships.
So if we turn to this year's event, can you tell us about the course building team you've got this year?
Yes, we have Gavin Chester building this year in Ring 1 and Ed McNair in Ring 2. Gavin will be ably assisted by Kevin Tully from Western Australia and Dave Johnson from Victoria. Clinton Hedger, nearly local from Cowra. One of the really great things about this year is we have the finals of Trans Tasman Test Series. The first one we did was last year's Jumping at Willinga. It was a senior test team. We had 2 Australian teams and 1 New Zealand team, and it was a great event. It was held on a Thursday evening. The grandstand holds about 1,000 people, and it was about 3/4 full, and it was a fabulous event. Australian, the green team won. Second was New Zealand, and then the gold team, which was the second Australian team. And we are going to repeat that this year. We have a series. Round 1 is at Waratah, round 2 is at Tamworth, and round 3 is at Willinga. The final round is at Willinga. And also young riders. So at Waratah for the last 3 years, we've had the Trans Tasman Test Young Rider Series on borrowed horses. Last year, the New Zealanders said that, they like this so much, could we bring our own horses next year? And I went, hallelujah, then we don't have to find horses. Apart from anything else. And so we've got the young riders, 4 young riders coming from New Zealand. we will combine the senior teams to be part of the World Cup preparation. So on Thursday evening, that will form part of the World Cup horses, their preparation. And then on Friday evening, we'll do the same thing with the young riders, because they'll have their final on Sunday at Willinga, their spectacular final on Sunday. And then, of course, the World Cup on Saturday evening. And Waratah, Tamworth and Willinga, we're all following the same rough schedule, so that, to maintain consistency throughout the three. And we're fortunate that with, Waratah in the indoor under lights, Tamworth's always been under lights, and Willinga under lights, we can do this evening thing for each of the Trans Tasman Test Series and also for our World Cups. We've got some nice sponsorship, which is always an issue. But the Doolan family are sponsoring all 3 rounds of the Young Rider Trans Tasman Test Series. Winnings are sponsoring all 3 rounds of the Senior Trans Tasman Test Series, which is fabulous. A team event always gets the adrenaline going for the riders as well as the spectators. The idea being that perhaps next year we can do a proper Nations Cup and invite a third country. Japan has possibly been mentioned, but wouldn't that be cool? If we could have a real Nations Cup with 3 nations as opposed to just us 2.
Before we continue with this chat, I would like to thank Divas Beverages for sponsoring this podcast and for all they do for our jumping community. Divas Beverages is a business that truly gives back to the sport we love. Visit divasbeverages.com.au to explore their full range of carefully crafted premium beverages. Now back to our guests. What can guests look forward to this year? I know that for the riders, you had a welcome dinner planned, and then we've got a VIP experience. They're always highlights of the shows. Is that all going to happen again this year?
Yep, yours truly is doing the welcome dinner again. I just can't help myself. So we're having beef chicks and polenta this year. The stables bar will be open, which is always, it's always a cool thing. And it's such a nice thing to do. We've got a sponsor for our welcome dinner, Divas Beverages, which is really good. There's so many people still want to come to Willinga. And I think for show jumpers, because of the surface and the facilities, everything else is just a fabulous add-on. So to do a welcome dinner, to me, the community thing is so important to me. I liken it to when I was on Jumping New South Wales committee, and I spent, 10 years that I was on that committee roughly. A lot of it I spent organising clinics for the juniors, for the young riders, with Rod Brown, with Jenny Shepherd and some others, Jane Frankham, when we had, guest coaches, Jamie Coleman, and that troop of now senior riders, Jennifer, Jim, Winning, not so much Kerm because he was in Victoria, Dave Cameron, Brooke Hickey now. Kids are such good friends and so supportive of each other all the way through. And because they rode together in clinic, they cheered each other on, they commiserated with each other, and they've stuck with that all the way through. And I think that's really important. And that community, when we all gather together over food and a glass of wine or soft drink, tea or coffee, it's important to me. It's really important to me. So, and we can do it at Willinga. It's almost impossible to do it at SIAC, I have to say. We did it at AJC 23 at SIAC when I had the big marquee on the Hecarine, because there you had somewhere for everybody to gather. But, at Waratah in the middle of August, it can be very cold, so it's a bit hard. But Willinga, it's easy, it's good, we do it. We've always got fabulous catering at the Bunker Camp. And we're planning our little bus tours that we do at Willinga, which it only takes 10 or 20 minutes bus tour, checking out all the sculptures and the gardens. And so that will go on this year at Jumping at Willinga. So that's Jumping at Willinga 25. I should say Foresight Jumping at Willinga, because Foresight are our amazing sponsors, I think for the 3rd or 4th year running. It's always a great thing when you've got a repeat sponsor.
So for anybody that's listening or watching this episode who hasn't yet been to Willinga Park, why should they make this year the year that they come along?
It's such a fabulous place. It really is. To be there, the sculptures, as I said, the landscaping, amazing surfaces, fabulous stables, the amenities block with the pool. It all just adds, and great competition. Most Australian senior riders will be at Willinga Park. I know I've got a little troop of Western Australians coming across. They're not senior riders, But they're coming across and making the big trip with their kids. They're coming to Willinga, then they're staying for Inter Pony Club Championships. So, isn't amazing.
It's a standout, that's for sure. So, Edwina, we've got a tradition on this podcast where each guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who that guest will be. And your question comes from Arslan Ansari, and he would like to know, and I actually think you're the perfect person for this question, so it's very lucky. He would like to know, what do you think that you can do in your role to promote the sport and bring up the standard of jumping in Australia?
Well, I think that's incredibly apropos when you consider who is coming out to build at Waratah this year. Original course designer pulled out. So Anderson Demura Lima is coming out to build in Ring 1 at Waratah both weekends. So Anderson is from the Mexican Federation. He is actually Brazilian. And he is building at the FEI World Cup final in Texas in 2026, so next year. So, there's the ultimate indoor competition in the world, and we've got him for 2 weeks for it. So as far as what I can do to raise the bar, that's what I do. My aim has always been to do a good show, and good for the riders. The most important thing for the riders is the surface, is the jumping conditions. Then I did a survey many, many years ago. It was one year we were down at Warragee. But I remember I was down there for the youth festival, Jane and John's youth festival. So we're all tossing around what's important. And, back in the day, prize money was the most important thing. And we all thought that had changed. So I did a survey. I asked, I think, about 100 riders and parents and coaches and trainers. And they all said, even then, and I'm talking possibly 20 years, most important thing was the surface. Second most important thing, and in fact equal second, was course design and gear. And prize money came fourth alongside amenities, which was of great interest to Jumping New South Wales, because it was contrary to how they used to feel, where prize money was the most important thing. These days, it is not. I've always wanted to produce a good show, good jumping, good surface, good gear, good course design, enough prize money. And then that community, that sense of community, so that, yes, it's competition, but we're all fighting the same blasted fight. And at this particular time, we are all fighting the blasted fight. And it's not a pleasant situation to be in for any of us. And a lot of us look at what's happening and throw our hands up in despair. But, I'm not going to let it stop me doing what I'm doing. Plans in April for an outdoor World Cup at the New Surfaces SIAC. And hopefully with another very good course designer. So that's what I can do to promote and better the sport.
So now it's your turn. Have you got a question for our next?
Well, mine, because I'm a cook, I think in terms of food, mine is not a show jumping question. Would be an atmosphere and a mood question. How do you relax? What is a relaxing evening for you at the end of a show?
Edwina, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me this evening. It's really, really nice catching up with you. And I'm sure we're going to have lots of fun at all the shows that we have coming up over the next couple of months. So thank you again. I wish you all the best for the shows that you've got in play.
Thanks, Jo. Great to talk with you, and thank you, everybody, for listening.